Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Churnett, who I think all of you know, and I'm with Climate Action Lower Merion. And I think, if not all of you, most of you know what Climate Action Lower Merion is about. I'll just briefly introduce us. We are a nonprofit grassroots organization of environmentally active Lower Merion residents, people who are beginning to learn about how to live more sustainably and obtain resources from us, as well as people who are looking to do more in the area of environment and climate change. And our mission is really to educate and make aware of Lower Merion residents of the things that are going on in our community, things that are going on in our county, as well as in Pennsylvania. And this is one of our educational programs. We do a monthly neighbor to neighbor program on different topics. So tonight, the topic is about gas leaf blowers, which is something that's been part of a conversation in Lower Merion for the last almost a year, actually. I think it began at the end of last summer, but I'm not sure. And we are so fortunate to have two people, one from Long Island and the other from Boston, although previously from Long Island, who are co-founders of Huntington Calm. I know that's very coincidental, but they will tell you what that stands for. And they are both, really well educated, well entrenched, very experienced people. Let me just introduce them. Dr. Bonnie Sager is a practicing optometrist who specializes in industrial and safety vision and serves as a consulting clinical physician to the hospital system of New York State. She and Dr. Lucy Weinstein, who is our other speaker, are co-founders of Huntington Calm, which is Long Island based, citizens advocacy organization established to educate and change public policy about the use of gas-powered leaf blowers and other gas lawn equipment. Bonnie is concerned about the many detrimental health impacts that gas-powered lawn equipment have on both landscape workers as well as the general public. She is actively working with communities, medical professionals, environmental groups, legislators to change policy on the use of gas lawn equipment and promote a more sustainable landscape practices. So that's Bonnie, and her partner, Dr. Lucy Weinstein, is a retired pediatrician and public health physician who now lives in the Boston area. She was co-chair of the Environmental Health Committee of the New York Chapter 2, that's the Long Island chapter, of the American Academy of Pediatrics, past president of the Nassau County Pediatric Society. Nassau County is in Long Island. She is assistant clinical professor of preventive medicine at SUNY at Stony Brook School of Medicine and worked both in Suffolk and Nassau counties in New York Departments of Health. Currently, she's on the American Public Health Association's Noise and Health Committee and on the advisory boards of the National Noise Free America and Quiet Communication organizations. She has addressed many local legislatures, as well as health and environmental organizations about the health risks of gas lawn equipment. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Lucy and Bonnie, and I am the slide coordinator. So let me make sure I have my, okay, I think I can do it. I think I can do it. It's been a while since I've had to be the slide person, but anyway. Welcome, Lucy and Bonnie, and who am I turning it over to first?
We'll start with Lucy.
I'll start, but I'll ask Bonnie to mention what CALM stands for. Originally, it was something else, and then Bonnie, you changed it to a little bit more generic name. So now Bonnie,
Yeah, it used to be Citizens Appeal for Leaf Blower Moderation, and then we changed it to CALM, standing for Clean Alternative Landscaping Methods, because we wanted to include that pesticides shouldn't be used, and not just gas leaf blowers, but other gas equipment and other more environmentally safe practices.
Great.
Okay, next.
I'm looking for the arrow. Oh, here it is.
You just-
Okay, is that, did I go 2 or
Oh,
1?
you missed one. Yeah,
Okay,
it was just a picture slide showing, I think. Can you go back?
no problem. There.
Yep. Just, I wish this, Bonnie had these signs made up. I wish that every property would have these. But unfortunately, not yet. Someday, perhaps the whole country will be, we won't need the signs. Next. Okay, what we were going to talk about, Bonnie and I will tag team, and we haven't done it together like this. So please forgive us if we haven't quite figured out how to do it jointly. But we're going to talk about all the negative impacts of gas leaf blowers. Admittedly, there's other lawn equipment, but the most egregious one, the one that causes the most harm environmentally and health-wise, are the leaf blowers. So we're going to talk about the health effects, some of the environmental effects, effects on small mammals, briefly, birds, plant ecosystems, and of course on our quality of life, and the alternatives. And Bonnie will address that. She's much more informed about the alternatives and electric equipment than I am. But of course, because of course you want to know, well, what can we do instead of these awful leaf blowers? Next. Okay, leaf blower primer. And Bonnie, please do chime in if you wanted to add anything. Leaf blowers, generally the gasoline variety, are generally called two-stroke engines. Basically, the point is that they produce, or rather they release 30% of the gasoline that's put in. It's just put out into the air. Some apparently are four-stroke. I haven't seen too many of those around. They don't have any emission controls, and we said the fuel combustion is extremely inefficient. There's commercial ones, there's residential ones, although we actually have a electric one. I hope some of you do. There's gas, and they're more available. More recently and better ones are the electric leaf blowers. Admittedly, way back they were not quite as powerful and not quite as good. But the power of a leaf blower, particularly the gas ones, air jet velocity, 150 to 280 miles per hour. That's pretty powerful. It blows up a lot of stuff and blows out a lot of stuff. Some can be handheld, some can be backpack. Next, and Bonnie, you want to do the next?
I'd just like to add that
Please do.
in the gas emissions, 4 of the World Health Organization's top 10 carcinogens are in that emission. There's benzene, there's 1,3-butadiene, toluene, and formaldehyde. So every time a gas leaf blower is ignited, you're getting carcinogens spewed, and we call it close point source pollution because it's not from a factory somewhere miles away. It's right in front of your house or in your neighborhood or next door to you.
Thank you.
Okay, Bonnie.
Edmunds, which is a car company, actually did a test, and they took a Raptor pickup truck and they compared the emissions to a backpack two-stroke leaf blower, and they found that the Ford Raptor put out less emissions and pollution than the two-stroke engine gas leaf blower. Using that two-stroke engine leaf blower for an hour was the equivalent of that Ford Raptor traveling 3,800 miles. So multiply that by 2 or 3 or 4 leaf blowers being used on a property, and you can just sort of get an idea of how much pollution is being put out by them.
Next.
There are many sources of health risks from these emissions and from the particulate matter from these gas leaf blowers. We talked about the gas and the 4 of the World Health Organization's top 10 carcinogens. Then you have fine particulate matter. That means anything that's less than 2.5 microns. It's so small you could never see it with your naked eye, and it actually is breathed into the lungs, and being so fine, it goes from your lungs into your bloodstream. That's why it's so dangerous. And then there's noise pollution, which is what usually bothers most people about these things. And the medical community is now calling noise pollution the new secondhand smoke. Noise isn't just causing hearing loss and attention deficit. Noise can raise your blood pressure, increase your cortisol levels. We'll get more into that a little bit later. But noise has many deleterious effects on the health of human and animal life. Next.
Okay, I'll take over. We're going to tag team here. And we have more on each of these things. Those at the greatest risk for the health effects and environmental effects of leaf blowers, particularly workers. We really feel awful for some of these workers. They rarely use the proper protection. Elderly who may have various lung, heart disease, lung disease, respiratory cardiac disease, and then children, and that's my particular interest because of course, as a pediatrician. Next. We've mentioned landscape workers who rarely use the devices. They also work long hours, very close, of course, to the very source. And it's vigorous activity, it's difficult. So they're breathing harder, more deeply, they're inhaling more of the particulates and the fumes. I mentioned senior citizen, children, pets who are low to the ground. And pregnant women, they've actually shown, and we'll show you later, that there's some particularly harmful effects on possibly on the fetus from the leaf blowers. Next.
Oh, go finish listening and I'll jump in.
Yeah.
About the landscape workers, there's a social justice aspect to it. You're asking a human being to sacrifice their future health so you don't see a grass clipping or some detritus on your property. These things weigh a lot. They also vibrate. It causes what's called vibration sickness syndrome. As Lucy said, they rarely have any type of hearing protection, so they're going to suffer from hearing loss. And again, being in that cloud of toxic emissions all day long and fine particulates, they're very prone to getting lung cancer and other disease processes from working with this equipment all day. Most of them do not have generous health insurance. And they don't know what they're being exposed to, and down the line, the problems that they may run into. So that's a social justice aspect that we should all be concerned about.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I should also say sometimes, I don't know, depending on where you live and where they're working, many may be undocumented and they're afraid to mention anything. They need these jobs. So they're certainly not going to complain to their superiors. And they may not have a medical insurance at all. They may not have appropriate medical care. And they're not usually educated as to the effects, the harmful effects of what they're being exposed to. Thank you, Bonnie. Yes. Next. I just was going to mention the children, particularly, they have a faster breathing rate. They breathe more air per pound of body weight than adults do. They're lower to the ground, so they're lower to the source. And their organs are still developing, which means they have this quote, window of vulnerability for some of the side effects. And of course, greater interaction with the outdoors. You know, I'm shivering inside, and the kids love to stay out a whole lot longer than I do. And they're out, particularly in the warmer months, of course, when the leaf blowers are in use, perhaps after school, when the days are longer. And those are, again, the times when the leaf blowers are most in use. Thanks. Next. Bonnie, you want to take the next two?
Okay. The gas leaf blowers produce thousands of tons of pollutants a year. You have nitrous oxides, you have volatile compounds, as we said before, the toluene, benzene, formaldehyde, and the fine particulates, as well as carbon monoxide. In the summer months, this becomes a particular problem because you have the nitrous oxides combined with sunlight to create ground level ozone, or smog, as many people know it, which also is a carcinogen and causes all sorts of health problems. So those are some of the things that the gas leaf blowers produce. And as the little picture says, it's 300 times more polluting than a car. Most people intuitively say this can't be. It's a small little motor on the back of a human being. It can't possibly equate with a car, but it does. And in developing nations, they are eliminating the use, Indonesia, Malaysia, they're eliminating the use of two-stroke engines because they are so highly polluting, and that pollution causes many health effects, which costs tax dollars. So we're one of the few countries that actually allow two-stroke engines to be used regularly in our neighborhoods on a daily basis. Next. So as we said before, gas leaf blower, exhaust, and emissions, you have the volatile organic compounds, nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide combined with sunlight creates that ozone or ground level ground level smog. So it's a health pollutant, it causes lung damage, and it's particularly harmful. Next. Lucy.
Oh, sure. Many of the pollutants that we mentioned, benzene, toluene, and betadine, are considered by the EPA to be either hazardous air pollutants or criteria air pollutants. Some mean just resulting in certain harmful lung and heart effects, but also actually carcinogens, cancer producing. The EPA actually categorizes them as that. And some of these risks are, again, we know that they're not a huge increased risk, but there's proven, there's evidence that they are. Compared to some other risks that we may face, perhaps not as huge, certainly not as huge as smoking, perhaps, but it's a lot higher than people might know. And of course, if you're using them over many years or you're exposed to them over many years, the risk increases. So I'm not trying to scare everybody and say, oh my God, inhaling some of this one time is going to cause these cancers, but there's definitely an increased risk: breast cancer, lung cancer, bladder cancer, some leukemias, and cardiovascular disease. Next. This is just another summary, not quite a summary, from the American Lung Association, a listing basically of some of the health effects that have been linked to gas lawn equipment. And overall, basically, this is a statistical thing from health organizations to look at premature death overall. So that includes all these different possibilities, including developmental harm for children, as we mentioned, reproductive harm, asthma, lung cancer, certainly wheezing and coughing, shortness of breath, cardiovascular harm, susceptibility to infection, in other words, reduced immunity, lung tissue redness and swelling. So these are all, this is from the American Lung Association. It's not even our summary. And it's interesting that these effects have been known for quite a while, and yet most of the American public, I must admit, even until I looked into it, I was most annoyed by the noise. I was most bothered by the noise, and it's only with Bonnie, whom I got in touch with, she got in touch with me, that I started looking into it, and she and I looked at the health effects. But most people, not surprisingly, are really unaware of how harmful these machinery can be. Next. Bonnie?
Okay, so we talked about this fine particulate pollution that's less than 2.5 microns that you can't see, that penetrates your lungs, gets into your bloodstream. The other thing I want to mention is when your landscaper leaves and shuts off his blower, you think the pollution is gone. It isn't. That fine particulate matter and some of the emissions can linger in the air for hours to days and can drift quite a few miles. So you're being exposed to it. You think you're at work all day, you come home, you haven't been there when the landscaper's been there, so everything looks nice, and you have no idea that you're still being exposed to these fine particulates that can be surrounding your house for a couple of days. Next. So possible particulate components, when they blow up, as Lucy said, up to 280 miles an hour in some cases, you're blowing up mold and fungus spores, pollen, insect eggs, heavy metal, which is from brake tire dust and from tires, animal feces, weed seeds, fertilizer products, any type of fungicides or pesticides that the landscaper has put down. And it's approximately 5 pounds of particulate matter per leaf blower per hour that are blown up. That's a staggering amount. And again, that can stay suspended in the air for hours to days, especially on a hot, humid summer, a couple of days in a row. You're being exposed to this continuously. Next.
And you can go ahead.
Oh, your turn, Lucy.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I should mention, of course, it's obvious that whatever is in the soil in your particular neighborhood is what you're going to be exposed to, and it may be different in different neighborhoods. The risks of particulates, I mentioned exposure in pregnancy. There's a hazard of leaf blowers. They actually have shown a slight increase in premature birth with repeated exposure to these particulate matter. By the way, particulates are blown up by other sources as well, but one of the major ones, as we mentioned, is leaf blowers. And there is they've actually shown a slight increased autism risk, not the major risk. There's, there are many different causes of autism, so don't think it's all leaf blowers, of course not. But with third trimester exposure, there has been shown to be a slight increase in the risk of autism, actually, with particulate matter. Heart attacks, arrhythmias, strokes, congestive heart failure. And when we talk about alternatives, some of you may be thinking, well, how about the electric leaf blowers? Don't they do that? Yeah, we'll talk about that. It's not an ideal solution, but there are alternatives. The electric, Bonnie, maybe you want to chime in here, but I did want to mention that because some people ask, well, wait a second, the alternatives, not that you need to use electric, but it's not perfect, admittedly, but they don't blow up quite so much. They're not generally used at that high a velocity. So it is less, but it is still there, admittedly. We're not going to deny that. Bonnie, next. Did you want to say anything about that, Bonnie?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Lucy. The idea is that you have to compromise with the landscapers. They don't want to give up their gas. We don't want them to use gas. We prefer they don't use any blower at all. But in the order of compromise, you allow, in many cases, the battery electric blowers.
Right.
And what that does is it eliminates a great deal of the noise because the frequency is different, the decibel level is different. So you eliminate that, and you eliminate that carcinogenic emissions and that gas being spewed into the air. You still blow up, you still can blow up stuff and cause damage, but 2 out of 3 problems you've pretty much eliminated by going to battery.
You may want to go to the next one. We already talked about particulates, particularly enough. Okay, who wants to make noise, Bonnie, you or I?
You can, Lucy.
I'll start with making noise. Yeah, it's many people think of noise as just an annoyance, and admittedly, noise doesn't seem to bother some people as much as it does others, admittedly. But whether or not you notice it and whether it bothers you, it's actually causing more harm than you might imagine. And noise is absolutely more than annoyance. I actually just helped revise the American Public Health Association's policy on noise and had to do a lot of research. I didn't do most of it, admittedly. There were many other people involved. But it's amazing how much research has been done over many years showing the health harms of noise. And yet most people just, and police, of course, and other enforcement agencies, et cetera, to say, it's just an annoyance. Well, it isn't. Next. Oh yeah, I love these. I just love the sound of rustling leaves crunching under my feet. Next. Just wish I could hear it. Yes, with the noise of the leaf blowers. Noise is unfortunately ubiquitous in this day and age, almost no matter where you live, and it is getting worse. So this is one source of noise that's totally unnecessary. We can't yet get rid of, well, I was going to say automobiles, but there's, electric. Anyway, there's many sources of noise that we can't quite get rid of, but leaf blowers, what is totally unnecessary, we should. Okay, next.
Okay.
Bonnie.
Leaf blower noise. The decibel level that it puts out, especially at the ear of the operator, can be 100 to 110 decibels. Even at 50 feet, it's 65 to 80 decibels. Decibels are on a logarithmic scale. So if you remember your high school math,
No.
I don't know, but if you increase by 10 decibels, you've doubled the amount of sound volume. So it's a different scale than a regular mathematical one. So an increase of a few decibels can be a tremendous increase in the amount of noise. It's especially irritating because it puts out a low frequency wave, and that particular frequency can penetrate your windows and your walls. That's why so many people are bothered by them. Even like today, I had earplugs in and I had noise canceling phones over my earplugs, and I could still hear the leaf blowers in my neighborhood. So it becomes very difficult to concentrate because that noise just penetrates just about everything. It also carries over very long distances. It can carry up to a half a mile away from the source. And as we said, it penetrates windows and walls and other things, and it's dangerous to hearing even at 800 feet. Next. Next. Okay, there we go. So this is a little scale, a sound thermometer, and it just shows you where gas leaf blowers are on the scale, and that the level according to the World Health Organization, the EPA, NIOSH, and there's one other organization, I'm blanking on the name right now, says that the noise level from a gas leaf blower is very dangerous to human hearing and other parts of the body. Next. Lucy?
Okay, yeah, so here are some of the health risks. And again, this has been known for quite a while, and the research is validated by numerous other studies. Increased stress hormone levels, increased cortisol leads to leads to high blood pressure, may lead to it, increases the risk. Abnormal glucose metabolism, that actually means that there's an increased risk of basically type 2 diabetes. Obesity, actually, this is all from the stress. Strokes and heart disease, certainly sleep disruption, that's rather obvious. Certainly during the pandemic, when people were home, people were hearing it more. Hearing loss, of course, we know that, but also lost productivity, worse school performance. I found it fascinating that there's a psychologist, Dr. Arlene Bronzoff in New York City, who at least over 10 years ago did a study in New York. There was a public school, they actually reached out to her. There was a very noisy elevated train, New York City subway line train right near a school building, and they studied the the scores, test scores of kids in the classroom right near the windows were right near the train line, and those scores were less than similar demographic, same kind of kids in a classroom that was away from that noise. She reached out and got I can't believe they were able to do this, got the MTA to fix something amazing. They actually did some padding, they did some noise mitigation. She went back and retested these kids, and this was after a while, and the kids actually did better. So it's basically an excellent study showing that noise is harmful, and mitigating it, helping to reduce it, does make a huge difference. So, of course, it impairs communication, social interaction. So there's numerous health studies, health risks of noise. And again, it's so sad that people think, oh, it's just an annoyance. Nope, over that. Okay, next. Bunny?
Okay, and going back to what Lucy just said about students, as a little anecdote, when there was a lockdown during COVID and kids were learning from home, there was a brother and two sisters in California that were trying to learn over Zoom, and the leaf blowers in the neighborhood were driving them crazy. They couldn't concentrate. So they started a little petition. They went to their town council and they said, that this was not good. And they were written up in the newspaper, and had to give them a lot of credit that they started to research leaf blowers and put the information together and presented it to their local politicians. So noise can be very bothersome. There's also an economic cost. The landscaper always says we have to get in and out. We have to do so many lawns a day, otherwise we lose money. But there's also, especially during COVID and now people working from home, the constant interruption from their work costs a lot of dollars. I've had local lawyers tell me they've had to take calls in the basement of their home because they couldn't concentrate or hear when the landscaper comes. So the landscapers don't want to hear that, but there is an impact on other people, and not only their quality of life, but their business and their need to earn a living from their homes. So get to this slide, there's harm to wildlife and ecosystems. Birds, there's a lot of evidence that they don't produce progeny when there's a lot of noise. They react to it the way us humans do. They get very stressed out. Small mammals and beneficial insects and pollinators like the bees are destroyed many times by the gas leaf blower, the force. They will come in and they'll blow the soil, they will blow places where they've built nests, and they just absolutely get obliterated by those up to 280-mile-per-hour winds. Then they also desiccate any type of pollen or sap at the base of a tree. And now the latest thing is most of them are blowing the lawns. They don't just blow the hardscapes, they blow the entire property. Well, when you blow soil, you kill soil microbes. So what happens? Your lawn becomes stressed. it turns brown. They put down more fertilizers or pesticides to try to combat that, and it becomes a vicious cycle. The more pesticides and fertilizers you put down, that has other repercussions on ecology. Next.
Yeah, I'm coming.
Okay. So as we said, the landscape destruction, there's damage. They blow away good topsoil. There's desiccation, which means it dries out things. It compacts the soil so it doesn't become as productive if you're planting any type of crop or flowers or vegetables. It kills good soil microbes, and it can also spread plant diseases. And many people, as we said before, it blows weed seeds around. So some people are very neurotic about having weeds in their lawn. So your neighbor's landscaper comes and you've got dandelions that are ready to drift off and other types of weed seeds. They get blown all over the neighborhood. And then what do? They put down more pesticides and things to kill the weeds. Okay, next.
May I just mention in terms of the, well, two things. In terms of the birds, it actually disrupts their communication bird to bird, and that may affect the population of birds in that area. And at least on Long Island, everybody seemed to want a perfectly immaculate lawn. And do we really need to blow away those leaves from under the bushes where these tiny little, small mammals might live that are really not so harmful to all of us? That just adds to what they said before, basically.
You want to take it, Lucy, or?
Oh, sure. Since it's on there. Yeah. More pollution. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Gas spillage. We mentioned 30% of generally about 30% or more of the gasoline that's poured into that gasoline leaf blower doesn't even get burned. It gets blown out into the atmosphere. And the gasoline spillage is actually estimated at about 17 million gallons per year from lawn equipment. This is more than the leakage from that Exxon Valdez, if you remember that from years ago. So it's a lot of wasted gasoline, and it's toxic. The grass clippings, which may have nitrogen fertilizer, they're blown into the streets and into storm drains and basically into our local waters as well. May contribute to algae blooms and affects ground and surface waters. Next.
And one other thing I'll add to that slide, Lucy, is there's evaporative emissions also. All those gas cans that are stored in their trucks,
Right.
Even if they have the caps on them, there still is evaporative emissions. So that's another source of pollution.
Okay, how about you, Bonnie, for this one?
Okay. Manufacturer's guidelines, if you read the booklet on how to use a gas leaf blower, you're supposed to use it on a flat surface only. Well, we've seen guys using them to clean out gutters on houses and off of roofs and all sorts of things that are not condoned by the manufacturers, but such is the way it is. You're not supposed to use it for moving dusty materials. Well, as you can see in the picture in the top right in the middle, they blow a tremendous amount of dust and dirt around there. They do the streets, what's ever in there. It's just indiscriminate blowing. You're not supposed to point it in people or pets. Many of them are courtesy, show enough courtesy that if you're walking by, they will stop using the blower until you go by. But sometimes they're not even aware because it's so loud that you're in the vicinity of their blower.
Can I just interject just for a second to say, we all agree the landscape workers are not our enemy. Most of the time, we're not trying to say, oh my God, they're so awful. They're doing all this awful stuff. Most of the time, they don't know much of the harms, and they have the public expects their lawns to be immaculate and get angry when they're not. And the people want their little sidewalks, these dusty areas to be blown away. So we're not trying to say the landscapers are to blame rather. And again, I said they very often don't know the harms that they're doing, and they're on a deadline. I've seen I actually, in our neighborhood, I went to talk to a guy working using a leaf blower, and asked him actually to use a broom on the road instead of the leaf blower. And he started to do that. His supervisor came over and started yelling at him because he was on a time schedule. So again, we're really not trying to say that the landscape industry or the landscape workers are our enemy. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, good point, Lucy. The guidelines also, they're not supposed to use a leaf blower at full throttle. Well, I'm sure most of you are aware that's the only speed they know is full throttle, no matter what's on the ground. It could be a big pile of wet leaves, or it could be a little patch of grass clippings, and it's full throttle. You're not supposed to use more than one blower at a time on a property. Many times, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner picture, there'll be an army of them in lockstep, 4 or 5 or more blowers going at a time. And they're supposed to be wearing ear protection, eye protection, and some type of a mask or breathing protection. And you rarely see that, which is unfortunate, because OSHA says that it's mandated, but very few workers have that type of protection, or do their bosses provide that for them?
Yeah, PPE is personal protective equipment, if there's anybody that doesn't. Yeah, that's what Bonnie was talking about. Oh no, my battery's running low. Let me plug this in.
And while Lucy's plugging in, I'll just make a point. Homeowners are afraid to ask their landscapers not to use a blower. We've had people say, oh, I can't tell my landscaper what to do. And always amazed by that, because you employ them. Yes, you can. You can tell them, I do not want you to use a gas leaf blower on my property. Either a battery, a rake, a broom, or just leave things as they are. People, if you had a painter in your house and you didn't like the job they did, or a carpenter, you would tell them. But yet for some reason, it's verboten to tell your landscaper how you want your property maintained. So some of the alternatives, and we hope that people will tell their landscapers about this and share this information. There's always natural landscapes in many places now in parts of California, in Nevada. They are paying people in Minnesota to actually pull up their lawns. It's a monoculture. It's not good for pollinators. It's the biggest source of water usage in most communities. So more and more natural xeriscaping or natural landscaping is being encouraged. There's mulching mowers. If you mulch the leaves, it's actually free fertilizer for you. You don't have to blow every leaf away. In a few days, if it's mulched properly, the leaf will disintegrate. And then, as we said, the electric blowers, today, commercial grade battery blowers are available. They're as powerful as gas. What you have to do is you have to have an extra spare battery, just like you'd have an extra gas can on your truck for when you run out of gas on your blower. Just like the battery runs down, you put a new battery in and you charge the other one. There's also rakes and brooms. I don't think the landscaping commercial industry is ever going to really go that route. Even though it can be as effective and as efficient in some circumstances, it's just the mindset that it's not a powerful tool and it won't get the job done. So we promote electric blowers. Again, not a perfect solution, but much, much better than a gas blower. And also with an electric blower, to preserve battery life, you don't leave it on all the time the way you do a gas blower. These guys don't want to keep pulling the ripcord, so they just turn it on and leave it on. With a battery blower, you just hit a button and it instantaneously goes on. So if you're walking across the lawn, you don't have to have the battery blower on. When you get to the place where you want to blow, or be a patio or a walkway, you just hit the button and use it, and then pull your finger off the button and walk to another area where you want to blow something. So you do that to conserve battery power. Next. So as we said, you want to promote natural landscapes, and parts of the country out west, especially now with the drought that they're experiencing, more and more people are going this route. I don't know, I think it will be years before it hits the East Coast the way it's hitting the West Coast, but it is a trend. We certainly encourage the use of less fertilizers because, as we said before, fertilizers have a lot of nitrogen in it, can be blown up and aerosolized, can also end up in our water systems. Natural landscapes require less maintenance. And it's healthier for the ecosystem, for our pollinators, and for us. Next. Oh,
I think we talked about that already, yeah. And mulching. Next. And
yeah, so going back to the electric blowers, they use lithium ion batteries. And a lot of people will say, oh, but mining lithium is bad for the environment. And we say, well, don't you have a cell phone? You're using a lithium battery in there. Nothing is perfect. It's a trade-off. It's a compromise. It's which is the lesser of the evils. And when you compare gas to a lithium battery blower, it's much better using a battery blower for so many reasons. It's quieter, so your quality of life is much better. It's better for the landscape worker not being exposed to those high decibel levels. It's comparable to gas in performance today. A few years ago, we have to agree with the landscapers, it wasn't quite there yet, but today it is there. Every manufacturer of gas is now producing a battery blower. You have Stihl, you have Husqvarna, you have Toro. All the major manufacturers have battery blowers now that are comparable to work production as gas. Batteries are zero thermal run. They're safe.
what is zero? Forgive me, Bonnie. What does zero thermal run mean?
I was just going to ask you, Lucy.
I should have taken that out. This obviously was a slide from American Green Zone Alliance, which is a
My husband says it means that there's no heat produced.
there you go. Sorry about that. Yes.
That's right. So they are, and people will say, well, what happens when the battery is at the end of life? Yeah, they can be recycled.
Yeah.
So there isn't a problem with doing that. So some people complain that, oh, you're going to pollute the environment with lithium batteries when they die. No, they can be recyclable.
Although admittedly, I understand there may be a shortage of lithium, but again, this is not a perfect solution, and it doesn't, compared to some of the other options. Okay, well, I almost took out that zero thermal run because I didn't know what that meant, but I did. I should have taken it out. Okay, next. Oh yeah, landscaper objections. Oh yeah. Do you want to? Oh, all right, I'll start with that and then you mention it. They've shown many times that a number of studies that actually you save money by not using the gas leaf blowers. There's the gasoline, there's the maintenance, there's parts. The electricity is minimal amount of money. Yes, once you buy the batteries, they'll last for a long time. And the upfront cost is there, no question about it. And many places, some states actually, New York is hopefully poised to put in what do you call it, Bonnie? Rebate for electric. But what's it called? The time to return on investment comes fairly soon, depends on how, where you are in the country, but there is that return on investment and it ends up saving money. More time needed, as Bonnie said, originally the equipment was not as powerful and it did take somewhat more time. We're not saying it doesn't, but nowadays it really, there's not a whole lot of difference, and equipment did not used to be as powerful, but it is now. There is some training practice needed because it's different from the gas use. They don't have to be the full throttle. You have to turn them off and on, as Bonnie said. So there does need to be some education. And understanding change is hard, and for landscapers to switch over, I can't blame them. Anytime anybody has something that they're told to do a different way, it does take some doing and some convincing. But they want to do what's right also, and it also helps, of course, if the public is asking for it. So when you have the public asking for perfect lawns and not knowing what the harms are, it's a real problem for the landscaper. When you have educated people like you now and others who will ask for a cleaner solution, then the landscaper will come around and they'll be willing to use the newer equipment. And Bonnie, businesses?
Yeah, there's a couple. There are quite a few. There are two actual nationwide franchises. One is Clean Air Lawn Care, and the other is Sun Cutters or something like that. Here on Long Island, unfortunately, we only have Jackson Dodds, which is out by the Hamptons, that uses all battery equipment. There isn't even a landscaper around here that uses a battery blower. Everything is still very gas intensive.
Yes, sadly.
Yeah.
That's why we call it Long Island.
Yes, definitely.
Lawn guy land. Oh yeah.
Going back to,
We love our lawns. I don't know about you, the green lawns. Oh boy.
yeah, that's a priority here. But going back to for a moment about price increase, the landscapers, and we've seen it here on Long Island, will say, oh, if we go to battery, we're going to have to charge you 2, maybe 3 times more. Well, what are you basing that on? And when you ask them, they can't give you a reasonable answer. The reality is it's a very competitive industry. Prices from all the places that have banned or restricted gas leaf blowers. We've spoken with people in many places in Westchester, out in Sonoma, California, which is one of the first to ban gas leaf blowers. There have been no price increases whatsoever. And today, with gas at over $4 a gallon, when you buy a battery, it's like what the airlines do. You're hedging. You're paying for your gas up front by buying a battery. And then, as Lucy said, you don't need belts, hoses, tune-ups, spark plugs, degreasers, detergents to maintain your 2-stroke engine. And all those bottles of detergent and degreasers and belts, hoses, and spark plugs end up in our landfill or an incinerator. And that causes another problem for our ecology.
Good point. Next. There we go. Oh, that's this. All right, next. I had a duplicate slide there, sorry. Oh, this is the return on investment and the price difference. Did you want to talk about this, or it basically?
Yeah, this is a bit of an old slide because gas is more expensive, and the nationwide average for a kilowatt of energy to charge a battery is 16.5 cents. He has 15 cents. The fuel and oil maintenance per hour has gone up because of the price of gas and oil. And he's basing it on 850 hours of usage. But as you can see, basically the bottom line is the savings by using an electric blower over gas. Some other points to tell your landscapers, they may not be aware of the tax law that changed a few years ago. When you buy a piece of equipment today, you get a full write-off in the first year of purchase. It used to be you had to amortize it over the lifespan of the equipment. So they would have to take it over 3-4 years. Now they can take it off immediately. And the other thing is electric blowers so far have been out in commercial use for about 10 years now, and they're still going. Most gas blowers have to be replaced after 3 years. So not only are you saving by not having to have gas and all the other accoutrements that go with maintaining an a gas blower, your life of the blower is going to be a lot longer. You're not going to have to replace it every 3 to 4 years. Okay, next.
Next. Okay, so we'll do this maybe together a little bit. Many communities, thank you for being interested in this. You know, the community that might do something about it, and we really thank you, congratulate you for even coming up with this solution. Because many communities have already enacted restrictions or bans, except for our community on Long Island. Somehow we can't get them to do it, right, Bonnie? But
well, no, some on Long Island have, but not Huntington, not where we come from.
Where we live, not where I used to live and where Bonnie lives now. Yeah, the entire state of California now, as of what year, Bonnie?
As of 2024.
They'll no longer be able to sell gasoline or use, is that correct?
They'll be able to use, but they will not be able to sell any gas lawn equipment.
And this is new. This is fairly new. Washington, D.C. had a ban on them for quite a few years. Many towns in Westchester, many on Long Island, except ours, as we said, Huntington. Where I am up now in the Boston area, Lexington, right next door to me, just instituted. Again, it's going to take effect in a few years, but there'll be restrictions on the months of the year when the leaf blowers can be used, which makes sense. There's a transition for people to get used to this. In the summer months, there are not that many leaves on the ground. Do we really need blowers to blow the little grass clippings and dust off the sidewalks? No, we don't. So Lexington, Cambridge, Newton, and now you said Salem and was it Marblehead? And Anyway, and New York City's considering them. Maplewood, New Jersey, actually, we gave a talk there quite a number of years ago. They also have restrictions. So they're more and more. So people are becoming aware of it. There is hope, and hopefully in the not too distant future, they'll have bit the dust, as we said. Don't have them anymore. Next.
Yeah, and just a comment on the state of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has, as of January 1st of this year, has banned gas leaf blowers all year, not just summer restrictions, and they have also banned the sale of gas leaf blowers in Washington, D.C. So it is the strongest and most progressive place in the country when it comes to gas leaf blowers.
I passed this sign myself. I was actually going to an English country dance, the town of Mamaroneck in Westchester, and there's this big sign. It's the first actual one I'd seen. No gas-powered leaf blowers. This was quite a few years ago, June 1st to September 1st, so September 30th rather. So that's a typical time restriction, month restriction. Whereas, of course, ideally we'd have a permanent ban. But I was very, very happy to see that sign. Next.
Just another town in Westchester, Larchmont. Larchmont is the first in New York State to ban gas leaf blowers all year, and battery blowers are only allowed 2 months in the spring and 2 months in the fall. Otherwise, you can't use a blower at all.
Wow. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
All right, and here's our final plea to be part of the solution. What can people do? We can't we can't do everything, but we can tell our own landscape companies not to use leaf blowers. We do have, and we can send to Nancy, a lot of fact sheets, information sheets, some actually meant for landscapers, some actually in Spanish. At least there are a lot of Hispanic landscape workers around our area and Long Island area. Try to use a company that's willing to use quiet, clean, and healthy alternatives. Advocate. Oops, I didn't move that. Yeah, advocate, as we try to do, and hopefully you'll do. Sorry, I didn't move the picture over. Advocate for gas leaf blower restrictions in terms of regulations, your town, and then ideally statewide. Of course, nationally, we wish we could. Who knows, maybe. And there's something called the American Green Zone Alliance, an organization. Oh, thank you. Check out the DC ban. Good in the chat. There's an organization that certifies locations as a green zone. Is there anything you want to say more about that, Bonnie?
No, the green zones are good ideas. I don't know how effective they've been. We did one here on Long Island. It's just an area that's maintained with all battery equipment, and that's what a green zone is. You can do your own green zone in your own home or your neighborhood if you can get like-minded people to do the same thing. So as we said before, more and more towns, villages, and municipalities are either restricting leaf blowers or banning them. Here in New York, we have 3 pieces of legislation. One was passed by the Senate and the House, which would give a rebate, as Lucy was talking about before, up to $15,000 to a commercial landscaper if they purchase battery equipment. We're waiting for the governor to sign it, and as of today, I heard from the bill's sponsor that it may be signed by the fall. We were hoping it would be signed sooner so they could start getting the rebates immediately, but we're hoping in the fall that it will be signed by the governor. There's also another piece of legislation that's in the Health Committee that is asking that in all of New York State, blowers are not allowed to be used for 5 months out of the year. And then there's another piece of legislation that's saying by 2020, I think 7, no gas equipment will be allowed to be used in New York State. Don't think the second and third pieces of legislation are going to pass or get out of committee, but we're hopeful, and we're getting endorsements from environmental groups and from medical professionals and institutions trying to help the committees get them out and at least on the floor for a vote.
Well, speaking about organizations, I think that's the final, one of the final slides. The next, maybe the organizations that have already come on board Oh, darn, I don't have the slide here. Oh, so sorry. Yeah, there's so many organizations that have written support letters for us or made statements. Medical and environmental, the Massachusetts Medical Society, New York State Medical Society, Sierra Club, American Lung Association, numerous local hospitals. Anybody else? Bonnie, oh my God.
Asthma Coalition, your group, the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Academy of Pediatrics. Yeah, just so many.
Stony Brook, the Children's Centers for Excellence. We've had doctors.
Oh, right, the Mount Sinai Center. Yeah, there's a series of centers of excellence in environmental health. Right. So, by the way, I noticed in the chat, somebody was saying that there's a noise ordinance where you are, but it excludes landscape equipment. Yeah, we found the noise ordinance, the possibility of using that as a, and we probably, I know, Bonnie, we probably should be quiet and let people ask questions, but no, using the noise ordinance has not been in general a productive way to go, unfortunately, because it's very difficult to measure, using the proper measuring tools, having them come at the right time. And people, those who are enforcing it, whether it be police or actually in our town, it was the one of the town, what was it called?
Code enforcement.
Yeah, code enforcement, whatever. They generally are not that eager to do it. It seems to be a very minor complaint to them compared to many of the others. So I think the pollution, although noise is certainly a big part of it, I think the pollution aspect is the way to go. But you can try anything, any way you can, and to have the landscape equipment exempt. Now that's interesting. That you can possibly do something about, knowing, giving them the information that the noise level of the alternative, in other words, electric blowers, is much lower. That might not be a bad idea. I'll be quiet because Nancy, you probably want to open it up to questions, unless Bonnie, there's something else you wanted to add.
I think we covered most of it. The only other thing I'd say, when the landscapers cry that they're going to raise prices if they've had to go to battery, I know around here, people are getting little notes in their mailboxes saying that they're going to be charged $5 or $10 more a week because of the increase in gas prices. So where they kept complaining, if we go to battery, we're going to have to increase prices, but yet now they're increasing it because of the gas.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but please raise your hand either electronically, or you can wave your hand if you have a question for either the speakers or you have a comment. Anybody have any questions? Okay, we have Nancy Winkler.
And thanks, Nancy, for your putting up the, Nancy put up in the chat the link to the Washington, D.C. Law. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll save the chat.
There's also,
You're muted.
You're muted, Nancy.
Oh, apologies. Well, I want to thank you both for just an absolutely outstanding presentation that I think would resonate with many people in our community if we could just find a way to get their attention to engage on this issue with us. And so what I am, and you know, you have a powerful message, and you know, I would love to learn what you see as what has been a successful strategy that's been used in other municipalities. I'm now the chair of the Township's Environmental Advisory Council, and we're working, trying to put.
You're so lucky to have you.
Excuse me?
They're so lucky to have you. That's wonderful.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but we are looking to get this as a priority in the township, in part like a plastics ban, as something that is the beginning of a longer set of changes in people's behaviors and views of what is normal, healthy, appropriate. And so the question is, have you been able to distill what has made a successful campaign at a local level to get these types of bans in place? Or do you know of any case studies or write-ups that we could, look to so that we could emulate them?
Well,
Good question.
excellent site. You put the Washington DC legislation up there. It's called Quiet Clean DC. It has a tremendous amount of information. It also has testimony from EPA officials.
Oh, wow.
It's Jim Fallows, if any of you know, he writes for the Atlantic magazine, and he also used to be a speechwriter for Jimmy Carter, very well connected politically, a very, very bright man. He started the movement in Washington, DC. He also had, he was very politically savvy and had connects. He knew who to call from the EPA to get testimony, and he did. And all that information is on their site. It's a tremendous, wonderful site. And you can get a lot of good pointers from that and a lot of good information. In terms of success, there is, unfortunately, if I knew what it was, after Lucy and I have been working for 9 years in my own backyard, and I can only get them to ban them for Sundays.
Seriously, really?
Yeah, after 9 years, where we've helped other communities within a year, it really comes down to the political will. If you have a community like in Larchmont, where the mayor and the trustees were very environmentally friendly and got it, they passed in a very short amount of time a full year ban, and as I said before, only allow battery 4 months out of the year. They're kind of an exception. Other towns, Maplewood, New Jersey, where Lucy and I spoke a few years ago, their mayor at the time, she hated these things and was quite insistent about doing something about it. And they started with, I believe it was a 4-month summer ban. They just a few weeks ago moved it to an all-year ban now.
Okay, what community was that?
Maplewood, New Jersey.
Maplewood. Okay, Maplewood.
So they started with 4 months and now they have all year. So that's how they did it. But she was a staunch supporter of it. Lucy and I worked in a town in Long Island, in North Hempstead. Julie Bosworth was the town supervisor at the time, a very level-headed, wonderful woman that said, we have to do something to compromise. I'm hearing from constituents that they're troubled by this. The landscapers had tremendous pushback. It was the first on Long Island, and Lucy and I testified. We went several times. We gave a lot of information, and Judy said, we're going to do something. No one's going to be happy with the solution because you're going to compromise. And that's what she did. So it was the first on Long Island with a 3-month summer ban. And
which town was that again?
That's North Hempstead on Long Island.
North Hempstead. That's interesting. That's a big town. I mean,
Yes,
that's
about
over 100,000 population, isn't it?
More like 260,000.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's a big town.
Tough to enforce. I'll give you a little clue. What she did was, if you had to register with the town, if you were a landscaper, if you weren't registered and public safety came by and you didn't have the proper decal, you would be fined. Each time they would fine you if you didn't comply within so many days. The fine got escalated. And she also put a proviso in there, which I thought was very smart. If you did not have the proper registration with the town to operate, you could not go to a town dump. So if you had any type of detritus, you had branches or tree cuttings, or you were not allowed to go to the local dump. You might have crossed over to another town, but you'd have to travel and go in order to get rid of your materials.
But as Bonnie says, it really does take the political will. It depends on the organization of your particular town, but in other places, it's you need a bunch of community members who, not just one, who are willing to speak to the issue. We're certainly willing to provide a lot of facts. Who are willing to go to a town meeting, bring it to the attention of however it works in that community, to attention to the supervisors or the town members. And be prepared, as Bonnie says, for a lot of pushback. The landscapers couldn't believe it. They showed up with green, here they're not using green equipment, with green armbands to one of our meetings. And they were shouting? Anyway, it was not.
They were quite nasty and vicious. They were blocking women from getting up the staircase to testify about how their children and how it affected them.
They're not, of course, they're not always like this. And again, I don't want to portray them as the, as the enemy. But it can be, it's not so easy as you've heard, but some communities are more willing to do it than others. And it sounds like you've got a number of interested.
And
folks.
I do see
If with you there, you've got
I
a
do
chance.
see someone else has their hand up, but
Sorry.
the other issue that we have wrestled with is that our sustainability manager is convinced that there is no viable electric alternative.
Well, let's
And
see.
so she's advising our commissioners that there's no commercially viable alternative. And so that is the other piece that we need to better better be able to address.
Well, we'll be happy to send.
Okay, well, if you could send it to maybe to me, and
Yeah.
I think we have to work quietly behind the scenes with her, not,
Or just send it to me and I'll get it to the appropriate people.
Well, actually, Nancy,
Not
since I
like
brought this
her.
up, I would like to deal with Paloma on this.
Oh, no. I meant, I would just, I think Anne would like to post some information on our website. Correct, Anne? Am I?
First, I wish to talk with the landscaper at the condominium association where I live about this.
Yeah.
I've already done it over the past couple of years, but he hasn't really heard me. And basically the argument I got was that they're just not powerful enough, especially with wet leaves. And that was the end of that. And boy, talk about armies. That photograph you had, I've seen as many as about 12 guys with these things, all blowing leaves down the parking lot. Nuts.
Yeah, Bonnie, are the newer, I was under the impression, because I haven't followed the electric equipment, are they really as powerful now?
Today they are. The problem, the power is there. What they're going to say is, oh, the run times, the batteries are expensive. Well, yeah, but so is gas, and it's like paying for the batteries up front. There's no maintenance. You're not stopping at the gas station to have to fill up as often. So, time is money type thing. But
I thought it was the power issue, and in truth, in the past, they were not quite as powerful.
But they really are now. And you can Google Husqvarna, you can Google Toro, you can Google Echo, Ego has, and they don't always have to use, especially in summer months, a backpack blower. If you're just doing hardscapes, Ego has a brand new handheld that is one of the most powerful blowers on the market. That's Ego, E-G-O.
Yeah, Bonnie knows her blowers. Yeah, maybe we can send this information to Nancy, and she can get it all out, and we'll be happy to send some fact sheets also.
Okay.
So she can get it out to
I
everybody.
think that you mentioned that you had some in Spanish, and I think that would be very helpful to our community. A good many of the landscape workers are Hispanic.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll rise up
Oh, I know.
like the mine workers did.
Well, just
They're killing us.
as an aside, workers' comp, you do not have to be legal. You do not have to be documented. You can go and get workers' comp and go to a workers' comp attorney under any circumstances. And there will be no repercussions as to your status or anything of that nature. They may not believe that, but we have spoken to workers' comp attorneys, and it's a different type of legal system. So there would be no jeopardy if they suffered an injury.
Well, that's the other way, that's another pathway possibly. There are a number of lawyers who now would be willing to take up the cases of people who claim, the problem is to prove that their health risk is from the leaf blowers. But I believe there are a number of lawyers, right, Bonnie, who are actually interested in pursuing this.
Yeah.
I'd like to get to Isabel's question. She's had her hand raised for quite a while.
Hi there,
Yes.
Bonnie. I don't know if you remember, I wrote to you because Climate Action Lower Merion has a petition that we presented to Lower Merion commissioners that last summer. And you helped us get that together. We watched your YouTube video. I don't know if you remember, but you helped me. So I appreciate it very much.
I was afraid you were gonna say, oh, we reached out to you and we didn't answer. No.
No, you were a very good source of information for us. And yeah, so thank you very much for that. So we did get it going. We have a petition signed by almost 500 people. And we did go to the council a few times. And every time we went, they kind of ignored us. Like I think I vented to you about that, but you were like, just keep going.
You know, the squeaky wheel of eventually, except in Huntington, gets greased. And as
Yeah,
more towns.
and we do have people who are receptive for sure. There are
Good.
commissioners, they're definitely, we had, anyway, but I have a question about this AZ, what's it called? The zone?
The ag green zone, yeah.
What is it? What does it stand for?
It's
American
American
Green Zone Alliance. I'm sorry.
Say it again, please.
American Green Zone Alliance.
Okay, so how does that work? Is that like you have to go to your neighbors and educate them and then ask them to commit
No,
to something?
it's a commercial organization run by one guy, and he's trying to promote battery equipment by establishing what's called these green zones. He's had a couple across the country. The idea is it's usually from municipalities. He will come in and do a park in a town and train the guys and educate them how to use the battery equipment. The town has to be willing to pay him his fee. They have to be willing to buy all the equipment. They have to be willing to sponsor like a celebration to promote this green zone. So that there's a lot to it. You in your own neighborhood, here we have, because we have the Great South Bay, there's an organization called Save the Great South Bay. And what they've done is gotten a bunch of neighbors together, and they all put out the same type of lawn sign, Save the Great South Bay. And it's become a rather effective political tool, but they have the cohesiveness of having a large number of the community supporting this and showing their support with these signs. So you could do the same type of thing if you have a neighborhood or area that they're willing to do that.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, that you could use.
Okay. Good.
I'm just looking at the sustainability Slack channel, and our sustainability manager has posted a slew of articles about the Quiet and Clean DC and case studies about it and newspaper articles about it.
The New York Times.
If you're on the sustainability Slack, you guys, you can look at it. She's got a lot of resources there.
The New York Times has also published a lot of articles within the past year about leaf blowers. If you go to the Huntington Com Facebook page, we have, and you scroll down, we have copies of all the articles that have been posted and other little sightings and things, and you know, NOMO, May, and things like that. So you may get some information off of that. There's also Quiet Montclair, which is Montclair, New Jersey. They also have an excellent site that gives a tremendous amount of information. So you may want to check them out.
Thank you. You both have been so gracious and a wealth of information. Does anybody have any other questions? We are over time, which is fine. It's really nice to, oh, Rob has a question.
Mine's quick. Thanks very much, Bonnie and Lucy. This was very helpful. Nancy, I assume you're able to share the video, because I would like to share the video with
Yes,
others.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. It will be posted on the COM website.
Yes,
Link to
as
it.
as soon as I get it from you.
Okay.
Right. Well, you'll get it soon. It won't take long. Anyway, sure. So if there are no other questions, just thank you everybody for coming. And it was absolutely a great presentation. It was everything I thought it would be and more. And we'll keep you posted.
Best of luck. Thank you so much for your interest. And also get rid of those plastic bottles, yeah, and plastic bags.
Oh, one other thing, we have our petition up. I wanted to just mention that still. If anybody wants it, we can, I'm sorry, I forgot to put it in the chat.
Okay, is it on the website?
I can get it right now. Hold on. Sorry about that. Right, and we used your little graphic. And I sent it to you, Bonnie.
Oh,
It's in
that's fine.
chat.
Happened. Lost her.